Hey y'all, it's Miss Moss. We're going to learn about Punnett squares today. Our standard is L.8.2B.3. This is going to be a part 1 and part 2 video. Okay, so here's part 1. We're going to do some vocabulary words in part 1. Our first vocabulary word is going to be Punnett square. Then we have allele, dominant, recessive, genotype, phenotype, homozygous, and heterozygous. Alright, so what is a Punnett square? A Punnett square is a diagram by Reginald C. Punnett, and it's used to determine the probability of what an offspring, what their genotype can be. Okay, so inside of this Punnett square would be what your offspring could be, and outside are your parents. That is going to make more sense in just a little bit. Okay, we have an allele. An allele is a letter. It's the letter part or form of a gene. When I say allele in my class, I literally just say letter half the time. Okay, so what are the alleles here? An example would be the allele big R is for red hair. Okay, the allele little r is the allele for brown hair. Okay, so when you see one letter, you're talking about an allele that is representing something. Okay. The genotype is the letter combination of the genes on an organism's chromosome, and it controls the organism's phenotype. So all your genotype is the letter combination. So last slide we had a big R and a little r allele. All right, whenever you combine those alleles, you can have a big R, little r. You can have a little r, and you can also have a big R, R. These are all your genotypes that you can have. Okay, so one letter is your allele. You combine two alleles together, you have a genotype. Okay, your genotype here for mom is big R, little r, and your dad's genotype is little r. This is important, because if we go back, if I can get this thing to go back here, the genotypes here for mom or dad, whichever one is a big W, little w, and one is a big W, big W. So you have to know those to fill in your Punnett square. Okay, now we're going to go to dominant. A dominant allele is a genetic factor that blocks another genetic factor. So what that means is, here in our example, we have a big R, little r, so this is our genotype, remember. If you pull those alleles apart, you have a big R and a little r, okay? So you have a big allele and a little allele. Your big alleles are going to be called dominant alleles. So your dominant allele here is that big R, okay? It's going to trump over this little allele, and whatever this big R is going to represent is what your genotype is going to portray. Alright, recessive is just the opposite of dominant, okay? It's a genetic factor that is blocked by a dominant factor. So here, mom's genotype is big R, dad's is little r. Alright, so the big R is going to be your dominant allele, which is what we just covered. Your little r here, and your little r here are all recessive alleles, okay? When you combine those with a dominant allele, that dominant, remember, trumps over that recessive. So let's say a big R is representing red hair. That's what mom is going to have. That big R for red hair is going to trump over that recessive R, and your mom is going to have red hair. Okay, let's say the little r is going to represent blonde hair. Okay, we only have two little r's, so we have nothing trumping over anything. So your recessive allele is what you're going to have. So this dad is going to have blonde hair. Okay, so big R is dominant, little r here is recessive. Those are alleles. Okay, your phenotype. A phenotype is how a trait appears, so the physical appearance of that trait. So when I teach phenotype, I always say phenotype, physical. Okay, so phenotype is your physical trait. So it's actually what you see. So if big R, little r, remember big R we said was going to represent red hair, and little r represents blonde hair. Just by knowing that big R is red hair and little r is blonde hair, we can know if mom and dad have blonde or red hair. Okay, so mom has a dominant trait and a recessive trait. Remember, dominant trumps over recessive. So mom is going to have red hair. That is her physical appearance. This is her phenotype for hair color. All right, and dad has two little r's, two recessive alleles. So his genotype is going to be recessive, so he is going to have blonde hair. Okay. Okay, homozygous. I want you to take out this word homo. Homo means pretty much the same, okay? So homo, same is what I want you to think in your head. Homozygous is a genotype. Remember, that's your letter combination. A while ago we had big R, little r was one of them. A letter combination in which the two alleles, the two letters of the gene are the same. So for it to be homozygous, this could not be correct. You would either have to have a big R, that would be homozygous letters, the same letters, or you could have little r, those would also be the same. But your big R, little r would not count. So for your example here, big R, little r, those are not the same letters. They're both R's, but one of them's capital and one of them's lowercase. So these would not be homozygous. Both of these are lowercase or recessive, so these would count as homozygous right there. Okay, heterozygous is the opposite. So homo means same, hetero is going to mean different. All right, so a heterozygous is your genotype in which the two alleles or letters of a gene are different. So here we have big R, little r, and little r. So this dominant and recessive, those are different. So this would be a heterozygous example. And these are little r's, both of them are little, so those would be a homozygous example. Okay, so heterozygous would be two different letters, or one's capital, one's lowercase.